So just everyone should know that this is being recorded and will be posted on the ANC3C website pretty quickly, actually. I think it goes up. And it's also a resource to other people who weren't able to make it and sometimes do actually see it. I also have found that you can make summaries using the recordings, which can be kind of helpful. Um, so just to introduce myself and what we're doing here, this is the meeting of the ANC3C Environmental Justice Committee for January. We've been talking about having this meeting for some time based on our own and community comments about landscaping and the plight of the street trees in DC, and wondering if there's what more we can and should do to try to improve the landscape and preserve and support and maintain the trees around us. I have this condition directly in front of my house. We had a storm, hurt a tree in front of my house, and so they had to be taken down. It destroyed a car in the process. Um, and then the city planted a new tree, but it didn't thrive. It died almost immediately. And then it took another year or so before another tree could be planted. And I wanted to, me and my wife were really wanted to know what we could do to help because we like that tree. We miss the tree cover, and we're pro tree. So I'm hoping we can talk about some things like that in this meeting. We have a couple guests invited to speak or present on different aspects of our community landscaping and tree cover and tree maintenance that was put in a notice. I'll probably introduce people as we go, but just to note that on our agenda we have Aaron Rowe, who's a DC arborist as part of DDOT. I'll let him introduce himself in a second. I understand that Aaron, you can say something about this, about your presentation or lack of presentation. But in any case, he's a resource for us today or tonight. We have Stella Tarney, who's a neighbor who heads up Capital Nature, which is a local group. I'll let her describe what she's doing, both as part of Capital Nature and in supporting the street trees in our neighborhood. And hopefully Cassandra Hetherington with Cleveland Park Mainstreet should be here, talk a little bit about the promenade and the landscaping there and ideas and issues that have come up there. So that's really our agenda, to talk about it, to discuss it, and maybe to think about ideas of what we together or we as the ANC can do uh, coming out of this meeting. Um, and so that's it. I'm going to go to the agenda in a second, but let me stop and see if anybody wants to add anything to agenda or add any topics to our discussion, or anything like that. Let me stop there.
Let's dive in.
Is anybody? Okay. Um, okay. So for our agenda, let me just make sure we have all our speakers. Yeah, Cassandra's here. Good. Uh, Stella here. Yeah, great. Um, so Aaron, can I ask you to introduce yourself and tell us what you can tell us tonight, if anything? And if you can only be a resource because you're not authorized to make a presentation, that's fine. And maybe we can have sort of a question and answer period, maybe after the other presentations, if that works for you. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everybody. Aaron Rowe. I'm one of the Ward 3 arborists. We have a team of 8, and that's the Ward 3 and Ward 1 are combined on our team, and it's divided into sections. My section is Cleveland Park, and a little bit below it, Upper Woodley Park. And I didn't realize I was going to be asked to give a presentation until recently, and I requested permission from our communications division through Department of Transportation. That's who Urban Forestry is underneath, and I didn't receive a response yet. So from them, kind of authorizing that. So um, I don't really know what I'm authorized to speak on today. However, these subjects are passion of mine. I know a passion of our division as well. So I, at the very least, wanted to uh, hear what people's concerns were, and I'm more than willing to answer any questions that I have the answer to for anybody.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. It's great having you here. I think you're going to be a resource for us. Would have been good to have a presentation, but that's probably my fault to not give you enough warning on that. Um, but maybe we can have some other presentations first, and then if you don't mind, Aaron, to let us just ask questions of you about the program and also advice that you might have to us for things we can do or and so forth.
Yeah, I'll answer anything the best of my ability.
Okay. Um, okay, great. So, Stella, can I turn over to you? Make sure to introduce yourself, sort of as a person and as a neighbor, and then go right ahead to the presentation you want to make. You're on mute. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Do we need to unmute you? Let me see if I can do that.
I just sent the ask to unmute. Let me just go ahead and make you a co-host too if you're going to share your screen. Okay,
Uh,
now
Thank
you're
you.
good.
Great, thanks. I also don't have a formal presentation. I came in thinking this would be a conversation, but I certainly have things to say and sort of a verbal presentation. So I'm Stella Tarney, and I'm a resident on Quebec Street. You all know the street by the synagogue and Quebec House, huge apartment buildings. And I've been active as a volunteer there for the last year and a half. We've been trying to keep the trees alive on Quebec Street because they've been so stressed from the drought, as you remember, drought of 2024, and then kind of general lack of care, if you will, on that particular street that is representative of probably a number of streets in Ward 3 and in our parts of Cleveland Park as well. So a group of us got together, and I coordinated because I've done things like that in the past. And residents, including Jay Bose, who was a resident to start out, we took a cart out and kind of did guerrilla tree care. We watered the trees whenever we could, and we've hoped to keep some of the young ones alive. Aaron has been incredibly helpful. I want to give you a shout out because you came and you walked with us several times, and we actually got to ask you lots of questions about the trees and their conditions. You couldn't be more helpful, and so we really appreciate your support. And from that volunteer experience, I see a number of needs that our group has, as well as other residents who might want to volunteer. And I'd be happy to talk about that. How can we make it easier for residents who want to do the tree care to actually get to the water, to get to the water source, and then get the water out to the trees themselves? What are the protocols we should be following? What can we do with our management companies, for example, if we're renters, to encourage them to take better care of the trees? And as you all probably know, Quebec Street used to have giant oak trees until just a few years ago, and those died off, unfortunately. And one of my neighbors was telling me that he used to see flying squirrels um, on the big oaks because they connected to Rock Creek Park. You know, Quebec Street runs right into Rock Creek. And I was just swooning because we actually just did a little article on flying squirrels in Capital Nature. So I was both sad and really excited about that. So that's my volunteer self. I'm a total nature nerd, environmentalist, and nature lover. I'm also co-founder and executive director of Capital Nature, and we were established to really connect urban area residents with the natural world, because we think you shouldn't have to go to a state park to appreciate and enjoy the benefits of nature. So in Cleveland Park, it can be literally walking down a street where we still have the remaining giant oak trees that still exist, or walking to Tregerin, or hopping into Rock Creek Park for a quick walk, or even looking at our front and backyards. And so that kind of immediate education has really interested me. Capital Nature supports the DC Master Naturalist Program. We do monthly programming for them, always in the sense of discovery and stewardship of local nature. And we also do have a partnership with Mount Pleasant Village, where we take the seniors out every season to do a nature exploration walk of the neighborhood. And some really interesting things have evolved out of that. A lot of the stewardship that Mount Pleasant Village is doing now actually evolved from those engagement experiences. And this is one of the things that I really would like to highlight and suggest is that, that kind of engagement that you do, the everyday walk, the engagement with the naturalists on your street, in your backyard, in a local park, really does lead to curiosity and engagement from residents. And that does lead, in the best scenario, to stewardship, such as it did in Mount Pleasant. And as a result, partly, it's not all us, but Capital Nature contributed to a growing community of nature engagers in that neighborhood. They started mulching the neighborhood trees. They started watering the trees over the summer. And now the seniors have organized a planting effort throughout the neighborhood to put in native plants around the trees, which is a really great approach, because when you put the native plants around the trees, even if they're street trees, it tends to replicate the environment of the forest so that you get a more complex ecology. The roots of the plants actually keep the soil organic, which retains the water. So it's also a climate resilient strategy. And that leads me, and I don't mean to take up too much time, but I think that leads me to one of the challenges that we all know we're facing, which is in Cleveland Park, in Ward 3, we are the most fortunate ward with tree cover, right? When I go to conferences or we talk about trees in DC, it's always Ward 3. That's the model ward, right? With the healthy tree canopy. We have more of what everybody else wants in other parts of the city, which is big canopy trees. But at the same time, when you look at Quebec Street, when you look at Connecticut Avenue, when you look at Gawain, what happened in front of your house, trees are also dying, in my opinion, and Aaron, please check me on this, but it looks to me like trees are dying at an unprecedented rate as a result of climate change pressures, the heat, the drought, the extreme weather, right? So if Cleveland Park is going to stay and be quite the fortunate neighborhood, if you will, then we really need to start looking at strategies to keep especially the young trees alive, and then to look at ways that we can enrich the environment around even the big trees to keep the soil healthier, to keep the old trees more resilient. So I'm very interested, both as a volunteer, Stella, who lives on Quebec Street, if the ANC can help us and urban forestry can help us get the water to the trees and figure out our strategies. And then in Capital Nature, as somebody who programs for nature engagement, I would love to find ways to engage and do some of what we do well with my nonprofit. And happy to strategize with you all and want to hear what you have to say on this issue.
Great. Thanks, Stella. Let's take a minute here and just have any questions or discussion from it. Aaron, would love your comment on the situation of the Quebec House or Quebec Street trees and the sort of citizen maintenance that was undertaken. How common is that? How much is that needed? Is there any sort of municipal obligation that is being missed or something, or is this just the situation? Can you say something about sort of the street trees and their maintenance?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stella, for that. It is not super common to have an organization like hers. It is very welcome, very helpful. She mentioned a couple of things that I try to get through. With regards to the particular block, it has seen more tree death than other areas. And we've been working together. Stella and Jay did a fair amount of data crunching to show kind of definitively that this particular block was suffering. more than others. And it's speaking with my teammates and whatnot, it's probably a combination of factors, including the age of trees that went into decline around the same time, and also salt use in the city is always a stressor for trees, street trees in particular, and especially around privately managed areas, large buildings who kind of disperse their own salt in addition to the city street salt. And it's a really big stressor for street trees. If I could grab onto one thing that Stella had discussed with regards to tree box, beautification, for lack of a better word. We hadn't really discussed this in depth previously, but I think this is a really important issue. I think that there's, with the development, along with climate change, but with the development of of city life, the increased population, I think that leads to like increased compaction of soils, and all of these things become added stressors for trees. And I think a great way to mitigate that is actually beautification of tree boxes, tree spaces. There are certain responsibilities that the adjacent property owner has over tree boxes, kind of basic maintenance. But there's also certain rights that adjacent property owners have to beautify these spaces. And in these types of beautification that Stella was talking about with regards to like native plantings, they can really serve several purposes. One being the increase in the health of the soil itself, decrease compaction, increase nutrient availability. But I also think that they serve as a visual cue to kind of protect the area around the trees and the tree boxes themselves, which I think is actually really important. I think a tree boxes kind of being not thought of as protected spaces lead to activities and treatment which are detrimental to tree health. So I really do think that that is a great strategy to support tree health, and one that I'm going to try to encourage at every opportunity. And yeah, that's all I have for now.
That's cool. Thanks for that. Anybody else want to come in with comments or questions on what's been said thus far between Aaron and Stella?
Sure, I had a question and comment.
Yeah.
First of all, just wanted to thank Aaron and Stella. You may not call them presentations, but for your overview, not only of the challenges, but environmental and otherwise, but of your own work, really inspiring work to further a goal that I think everyone I assume on this call really shares. I did have some comments and questions for Aaron that I hope maybe you can reflect on or take back to your colleagues. And they actually relate to activities that create more challenges for street trees and the tree boxes. And while some may think it's odd that DDOT has a forestry program, I don't at all. But in fact, these activities relate to elements that are more in the core portfolio of what DDOT regulates. And those include the replacement or placement of utility poles and infrastructure, and the failure to timely remove legacy infrastructure. And then the other is the deployment of e-bikes and scooters in tree boxes. So on the first, and then the third is on street trees themselves. On utility poles, I've noticed, around the neighborhood, including on the street where I live, where we're fortunate actually to have fairly deep tree boxes in contrast to many streets. But when Pepco replaced the poles, well, didn't really replace them. When they added new, heavier, taller poles, Rather than placing them near the street, they place them even deeper into the tree box, which has resulted then in even more cutting of the tree canopy because the poles have been placed closer to the trees, which, makes no sense. Secondly, as they've added poles, um, there should be a reasonable period, but certainly 5, in some cases 10 years is too long for legacy poles and infrastructure still to be there. DDOT regulates utilities that use the right of way for aerial wires, among other things. And, this not only again leads to the need to cut back the trees more, but just, introduces more infrastructure into tight tree boxes. Um, on the electric scooters and e-bikes that are managed and deployed by various services, I mean, I think everybody appreciates this additional mode of transportation. But what I've seen in DC, and I don't see as much in the other cities in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic where I travel, is the fact where I see these scooters and bikes, which in some cases are actually pretty heavy vehicles, deployed right in tree boxes. And in some cases, they're right on roots. I've seen roots compacted. Certainly the soils are compacted. And so as we talk tonight about, what civic organizations and private property owners can do to beautify the tree boxes, there are activities that, again, DDOT regulates that, create additional stress and actually damage to the tree boxes. And then finally, I understand the need for more, that diversity in tree cover is helpful from an ecosystem standpoint. Um, but it's also been my observation that too often as hell is full tree canopies come down on streets, that they're replaced not in kind or with some diversity of trees, but with nearly identical small trees, almost ornamental fruit or flowering trees that will never grow very high. And so, the neighborhoods lose this valuable shade, this tree canopy that will never come back. And so I hope that DDOT will reflect and, look to where they can maintain the tree canopies, that exist and augment it where they don't. Thank you.
Shall I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll take them one at a time. With regards to the power poles, it's probably a little too in depth to get into in this meeting. I can say that all those installations um, are permitted through us, through the Urban Forestry Division, and we're looking for tree conflicts. And when we find tree conflicts, we have every right to and do object and request rethinking, different placement, sending them underground. If there's a request to put above ground pole, like a new stretch of wire above ground where we have trees or want trees, those requests can and are made at times. With regards to the legacy equipment that's left, I don't know. Are you talking about, like, are these just poles that have nothing attached to them? Just
No,
like,
they still do. And as I understand it, they have to coordinate for other utilities, be it cable providers or phone company, to move the wires to the new poles.
I see.
And that should take place within a reasonable time. There has to be a period for it to happen, but years go by and there are, double poles, in some cases triple poles, not only in the vicinity of trees, and we're talking about trees tonight, but those of us focused on, some traffic and pedestrian safety issues find that they obstruct, intersections and block pedestrian crossings. So, our hope is that DDOT whether it's a regulatory matter or otherwise, can, force this, transfer of infrastructure to the new, and then removal, after some reasonable time of these surplus poles, which again hurt the canopy and other things. So
I understand now. Thank you. And that's a little bit outside my wheelhouse, but I'll certainly make note of it and bring it to the people's attention who are responsible for that. That's the best I can do there. With regards to the scooters and the e-bikes, with regards to like the regulations and what DDOT's role is with regards to that, that's certainly outside my wheelhouse. I don't really have any insight into that other than the issues of compaction, which is certainly something that a challenge for us. Pedestrian traffic, scooters, e-bikes, whatever. I actually deal with sometimes cars pulling up onto the curb. There's a couple places in Ward 3 where they regularly will hop the curb and park illegally, obviously. And I've gotten some signs put up, which to little effect. However, so these are some of the problems that we face. There are tree box fencing allowed if it's done in accordance to DDOT specifications, regulations. It's not cheap, the fencing, and there are differing views on this. It's about 18 high iron fencing, and there's people have different views on it. Personally, I like it because it does keep people and items out of tree boxes and reduces that compaction. Again, I can certainly, I made note of that concern with regards to the scooters and e-bikes in particular. With regards to tree size, this is something that when there's a lot of trees that have been planted under wires that have grown to be mature and were not appropriate to be planted under wire at the time, and so they grew. Some of them have managed to maintain grown symbiotically with the wires and had good form. Most of them end up being pruned. We call them utility pruned by the utilities into poor form. Many of them hang on for a long time, and some of them that form is compromises their structure. As time progresses, these trees are being removed. It's no longer practiced planting of trees that are going to be large in the future underneath wires for that very reason. And so our strategy is whenever there's a space that has no wires overhead, and assuming that there's also a ample amount of space around this tree box, we're always trying to plant the largest, a large tree as possible. So we basically categorize trees into small, medium, and large, a mature size. And so whenever possible, we're planting those large, mature sized trees. However, there's several places in the city where actually, just for example, many blocks, you'll find there'll be a power line on one side of the block and the other side won't have the power line. And so our strategy is whenever trees come down on the side without the power line, those are being large, mature sized trees. And whenever trees are removed underneath the power line, those are going to be exclusively small to medium size trees, depending on how high the power lines are. And that's done intentionally in order to keep these trees from having a compromised structure as they grow underneath the lines. I know there are some blocks with lines on both sides, and it's unfortunate that they won't get those mature trees. But I don't know if, I hope that answers the kind of question with regards to our replanting strategies.
It does, very, very helpful. And just on the scooter and the e-bikes point, of course, I'm not talking about where riders might just decide to park a vehicle, in a tree box. I mean, you can try to regulate that, but that's very hard. I'm talking about where clearly the service provider, when they redeploy the bikes in the evening or what have you, will sometimes put 3 or 4 in the same space in a tree box. So that's, clearly something that DDOT presumably could issue instructions or guidance on, so they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's news to me. I'll raise it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, thanks. I think Laura had her hand up. Laura, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, thanks. I'm just going to pile on the questions related to tree stressors. I've noticed in the newly designed and newly constructed storefront area in Cleveland Park, a lot of the vegetation in there is being compromised. But I'm not a rodent expert, but they sure look like rat holes. Could you explain to the extent to which you all coordinate with rodent control when you're actively involved in, repopulating vegetation in areas like happened in front of the Cleveland Park storefront area? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I'm familiar with those tree boxes there on Connecticut Ave that I believe you're discussing. As best as I can tell, they do look like rodent holes. As best as I can tell, that they're not. I believe that it is kind of structural at the creation of those tree boxes during the redevelopment plan. I think there's like some gaps in the concrete under there, and the soil that was used to fill it has kind of eroded down those gaps. I believe. I can't say for sure. With regards to rodent control, we submit 311 requests just like everybody else. And I have done that, and that's kind of our approach.
Thanks.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So with respect to, if it is in fact a tree box construction issue and not rodents, how do we go about fixing that so that the vegetation can thrive?
Yeah, that would. I don't know. That our tree box rehabilitation is about the scope of that is like soil amending. With regards to actual construction, that's beyond, again, my wheelhouse. I apologize. I don't have a better answer for you.
I think Cassandra might have some insights on that. I noticed she's had her hand up for quite a while.
Yeah. Cassandra, do you want to say something on this topic, and then let's turn over to you to talk about the promenade?
Sure. Happy to. I'm not an expert. I like trees, but please, I'm not an expert. A couple of things that have been said though. Rats are an issue, and the way that the DC, and this is to the best of my knowledge, but the way that the DC government handles the rat issue is it's not proactive. It's 311 requests go in, rat people come out, they put some bait down, they kind of leave the area until people start complaining again. So it's not a multi-pronged effort. It's not about, I think that there needs to be more investment in making sure that the litter's picked up. We have a clean team along Connecticut Avenue. It's one guy from Woodley Park all the way up to Chevy Chase. So he's only in Cleveland Park Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And we get a lot of foot traffic, particularly in the nicer months when people are going and coming from the zoo. So I think we need to put more money and I've actually talked to Councilmember Fruman about some of this, but we need to put more money into prevention. And the little mini trash cans that look like the little planters that look like trash cans, people continue to put litter in them. So there's a lot of attractive things for rats in that particular promenade. I did realize that some business owners were coming out every day and feeding the pigeons, which also feeds the rats. So I've asked them to please stop doing that. But I think definitely cleaning that up is a major issue. And I've actually been the promenade, that whole garden area. I'll just launch into my speech because it answers some of the questions that have come up. But so, as for those who do not know, during the construction, that was supposed to be pulverized rubber with trees. And the neighbors got together and said, we don't want pulverized rubber, we want landscaping. And so it was sort of, it wasn't a really well thought out plan. But DDOT was they were lovely. They put in some plants for us, the subcontractor, they put in some trees. And then they sort of they left it up to Cleveland Park to maintain. We have had a small cadre of volunteers who have a wagon and fill that with water and go out in the hot summer months and water the trees. There's only one external water source on Connecticut Avenue on the east side between Macomb and Ordway. One. So it's around Bank of America, and so that's what the volunteers have been using. They've been using that water source and then taking the wagon up and down to water the trees. So it's been really challenging to keep that area alive, and the volunteers have really done the best that they can do. I have been meeting with landscaping companies, getting quotes because I would like to just have it be someone else's responsibility that has the time to dedicate to maintaining that area. And I'm just in the process of trying to find funding for that. So I don't really know if I answered any questions, but
Well, let's see if people have questions or comments on what you said, and then I may ask a few. Janelle, I see your hand up.
Yeah. I mean, the proactive way of preventing litter is to have litter bins available for people to place their litter into them, which I believe Cassandra's been successful in having several of them removed from the promenade. So that's not exactly a proactive approach to rat control. DC Health, the vector control, rodent and vector control division does come and also uses like smoke treatments to uh I don't want to say poison, but it's frankly poison, and a more proactive approach to, well, a more reactive approach, but more effective than baiting. I went to a 2-day rat camp, so I'm pretty much an expert. I have a certificate. Um, and then the other one of the challenges with the promenade was it was the design was complete in 2018, and there was a lot of community support for permanently closing it to cars back in 2018, um, until a small, loud, vocal minority was able to have it be the shared space that it was then designed, and then construction happened. In that process, during when we saw like that the businesses did still survive, and even some of them thrived without those parking spaces, um, that's when the community made the effort to say, hey, looks like this can work. And that's when the design was edited, but not, it would have been optimal to have made that decision in the process that started in 2012, that was completed in 2018, where there would have been way more thought put into putting that a tree canopy line more in the middle of the street, whatever. It could have been different. So that's an unfortunate um uh situation that, but I think it's still better for the community to have that be walking space instead of car space, which we all know car exhaust isn't great for trees either. So I just wanted to bring up a few things there, because I feel like sometimes we get the proponents of that promenade project get thrown under the bus, like we've created a problem for everybody else, when it really solved more problems than it created. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I apologize if you think I was implying that. I wasn't. And as for the garbage cans, there was one garbage can that was literally touching the sidewalk cafe at Sababa and Little Blackbird. That's the only one that's been removed. And I only went to half of Rat Academy. I did not get a certificate, but I've spent a lot of time talking to Gerard Brown, who has told me that one, the garbage cans are regardless, they're terrible because they're just little rat buffets. Like rats can climb on the outside and get in. We really need those closed garbage cans. I know that right before he was retiring, that he was speaking with a company that might be able to provide them. I don't know what happened, and then he retired. But that's something that the city should invest in, or rat-proof trash cans. So, yeah.
Thanks. Other questions or comments? Aaron, do you have any, if you have any thoughts on commentary so far? We're particularly interested and concerned about the landscaping and trees that are in the little Cleveland Park business district, which is very new because that was redone recently and it's having trouble getting started and people are interested in it. We haven't, for whatever reason, we haven't adequately planned and supported that landscaping and the trees, and so that seems like an acute issue for us. But Aaron, I want to give you the floor if you want it. If not, then we,
Sure.
we have other people who want to comment.
Yeah, I can just add something that Stella and Cassandra's work, bringing water, that they're in their groups, bringing water to plants it's so important. As someone who has watered trees in the past, the the requirements of trees in particular and plantings, it's a lot of water. And carts, it's helpful, but sometimes it's trucks that you need. So I do hope that Cassandra is able to find a contractor and the funding and all that to make that happen. I hope also Stella, we discussed it about getting maybe some equipment to assist that. But it's so helpful to tree health that getting that water there. And to the point of funding, I just wanted to raise to whoever may have an answer to this. I do work with other community groups in my managed zone, and I'm hearing that they're getting kind of spot funding through the ANC for small one-off projects. And it's my hope to well, I'd like any information that anybody might have on that. And because I do know, speaking with Stella, I know that a little money would go a long way with their group. And if anybody could speak to that, it'd be great.
I might speak to that in a minute, but let me turn over to Jay.
And I have a
Great.
little bit of knowledge about Mount Pleasant ANC funding. So
Okay. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, Aaron and Stella, for taking the time to make these presentations. Super helpful. Aaron, I have two questions, kind of just for my own curiosity. First off, so I have understood that while it's DDOT's responsibility to plant and replant the street trees, as the case may be, DDOT doesn't water the trees. And so I guess I'm curious how we ended up in a situation where you have a government agency responsible for putting the trees there, but then not, responsible for following up with, watering and stuff. And that's not to, cast aspersions at DDOT. I'm really just curious about that. And then the other question I had is there any consideration as you guys, periodically replant these trees, as you were describing, are there hypoallergenic or low pollen varieties of trees that are available to put in? Because I know I suffer a lot from the pollen in the spring and sometimes again in the fall too. So appreciate any insights on those.
Sure, I'll go ahead. I'll take the second question first with regards to low pollen hypoallergenic. Not that I know of. It's a common inquiry and concern. And in my experience, every species has something objectionable to somebody, and unfortunately, and we are somewhat limited in our species selection with regards to obviously the zone that we live in, and also hardiness, because we are in a city setting. There are some species that just won't thrive. So fortunately, I don't have a better answer, or more pleasing answer than that. With regards to the watering, so our contractors do water the plants the first year. That is the most important time for a tree. As it's getting established, they are contracted to water the new plantings every 2 weeks throughout the summer, which is when it's needed. We do leave brochures, generally with the adjacent property owners, and basically ask if they have the ability to add to that watering schedule during like a particularly hot few weeks in the summertime. Then that's most welcome. But that watering for the first year is really important, and therefore that is why we contract it. Once the trees become established, it's hard to say. I just spoke to the great help that water does provide trees, and it really does. Once they're established, they trees do kind of maintain. They can live with the amount of water in the natural setting, but to really give them an added vigor and an increased growth rate, that additional water is very helpful. But again, it's a lot of water. I mean, if you wanted to, I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here, but like if you wanted to water a block of mature trees, you would be looking at like basically a tanker truck of water. It's a lot of water. So practically speaking, to get added water to mature trees, it's not practical. But getting that any homeowner engagement or community engagement in the case of Stella, to bring water to, particularly like if they have the ability to spot a stressed tree on a block and support that, that's something that is welcome, and a great addition to our efforts.
Got it. So I guess just as one follow-up, and then I'll turn it back to Gawain. So based on all of that, I mean, it sounds like the mature trees, it's a ridiculous amount of water that you need. So as we're thinking about, getting volunteers together and getting, equipment and materials for groups like Stella's, would you say it's fair then that we really ought to be focusing our efforts as a community on, supporting A, the youngest trees, and then B, the ones that are, most visibly distressed?
I'm sorry, if that was to me, then yes, for sure. Yeah.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you.
I see Janelle. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I kind of had like a follow-up on that, sort of. Is there a requirement for like the property owners to take care of their tree beds and the trees in them? Or is that what most people do just because it's better for their property value and look and feel to just take care of like the little amount of space that they're responsible for, right? Because I'm down on K Street in Connecticut working, and those tree boxes are pristine. And I know that the bids have more money than a lot down there, and they take really good care of it. But I'm just wondering if there's a requirement. I feel like there's one ethically and morally, but in law.
I'll just try to answer quick. So I don't have the regulations in front of me, but it's my understanding that the requirement is to kind of clear of trash. I think it's to maintain. I think that's the requirement, and then also to keep any I think like overgrowth or resident planted things below 18 inches. There's some certain requirements with regards to the beautification of it. But as far as like the requirement of maintaining a tree bed is just the picking up litter, and everything else I think is more optional.
Can I sort of relatedly, is the expectation of DDOT and the city for non-juvenile trees that they don't need maintenance, that they should be able to survive without the adjacent property owner watering them or something? Or is that sort of the expectation, or like say something about that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the general kind of science behind tree health is that once trees become established, they're understood to kind of be adapted to the environment that they grow in, and there's not an expectation that they're going to be supported with water for their life, and most trees don't need that. With regards to maintenance, that's then you get into we do provide regular maintenance with regards to pruning and other things like that.
Stella, you go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I was really interested in what Cassandra had to say about the promenade, because there are a number of approaches that could be taken. One could be volunteer based, right? The residents come out and do what they do. Another is to do kind of a partnership with the businesses. But I know a lot of the businesses on Connecticut Avenue are kind of holding on, and Cassandra has more knowledge of that. And the third is to farm it out, hire contractors, right, which will be the most reliable. And I also noticed that downtown, like the Golden Triangle bid has some amazing bioswales and kind of like model tree boxes that I promote when I give my talks on resilience design. And they have like serious contract support. Like they have landscapers that are coming in, like once a month and doing very sophisticated work. So I think one of my interests is what is the best strategy for the promenade? And Cassandra, maybe yours would be the most reliable, and certainly it's succeeded downtown if you can get funding. But there are also, these other constituent groups. So, and I think it would be interesting for us to address that and what's the best approach for them. So for the large property owners, we have the large rental buildings and condo buildings on Connecticut and throughout our neighborhoods. I think some education would be really helpful. Part of it could be in collaboration with DDOT, part of it could be with KC Trees, and of course, Capital Nature is available. But to really push for the best practices for those big management companies. Because at Quebec House, when Jay and I did the walkthrough and Aaron walked with us too, we saw a number of things that were really not best practices that were contributing to the tree stress, the salt. And I noticed that when we had the snow, Aaron, I was watching for where the salt crystals were, and sure enough, some very thoughtful contractor had actually sprinkled them almost generously around the trees as well as the sidewalks, helping the tree. I don't know, but like, what were they thinking? So there's, salt, and then the use of pesticides that is really strong around the Quebec House, probably controlling quote unquote vermin, right? And then cutting off of the mulch, right? Cutting into the top layer of the trees to make the mulch look neat, and it does, but it harms the tree roots. So if the ANC, we could all think about collaboratively, how can we promote best practices for the management companies, for the multifamily buildings, and potentially the commercial establishments as well. And then how can we help residents like Gawain, who has a new tree coming in, right? So what are the kind of best practices? How could we support if Gawain, you and your family wanted to help that young tree grow, right? So whether it's education or showing you how you might want to mulch, right? Because there's the donut mulching versus volcano mulching. It's very empowering to know it's supposed to be a donut, not a volcano. Then you can tell all your friends, and then learning how much water and how often they might want to be watered throughout a week. So I think there's some outreach and education that we could do collaboratively. maybe some demonstrations of good tree care, and then also some of the tough enforcement, Rick, that you were mentioning, like get those scooters off of the tree boxes, right? So I think there are, like, I don't know, maybe half a dozen tactical strategic things that the ANC could do to support tree health. And ultimately that'll result in more climate resilience, which is going to be really important. So maybe we could identify those, more consciously as we talk further.
Great. Yeah, I like thinking practically and sort of operationally about what we might do. It's helpful. I'm especially interested in helping sort of voluntary, action that neighbors are taking to do it. I think that's great, and I really want to encourage it. Um, I see Cassandra, and I also want to see if Aaron wants to respond. Go ahead, Cassandra.
So I think one of the biggest issues, particularly with the promenade, is resources. It's lack of resources. I mean, my entire budget for placemaking is less than $10,000. Bids have budgets of millions of dollars. My entire organizational budget is $160,000. That includes my salary. That includes Cleveland Park Day. That includes all the events. It's not enough money to maintain this area. And I don't think it's fair to put the expectation on the Mainstreet to keep the trees alive. It's just not realistic. However, I'm wondering if we have, I know that oftentimes council members earmark things in their budgets. Have we talked to Fruman? I mean, I know that, like, I felt bad about asking for anything that recently because of the fiscal situation that we've been in the city, but I just saw that we actually ended the year with a surplus. So maybe maybe this is bigger than Mainstreet and ANC. Maybe this is something that we need to ask somebody with a little bit deeper pockets if they can just send someone out with watering trucks. I mean, there's one outlet outside of Bank of America between Macomb and Ordway. I don't know how that one little water source and Bank of America is supposed to keep all these trees alive. So
Yeah, thanks. Well, we should try to think creatively about that, and there might be some scope for the ANC to be providing a bit more support, although we also have limits to our resources. But I do want to ask Aaron, we're getting to our final minutes here, but I do want to ask Aaron about other sort of voluntary or neighbor-led efforts for tree support and maintenance and so forth that he's aware of, and whether whether DDOT or other city agencies might have some engagement in that, either just providing guidance or any kind of support or whatever. I'm curious if he's aware of anything along those lines. Go ahead.
There we go. Thanks for that. Yes. So a couple other groups that I work with, Friends of Hearst Park, and they're very involved in tree care of Hearst Park. They have, I think they have some of their own fundraising that they do, as well as getting supported by their ANC, I believe, at times. And then there's the Newark Community Gardens that I work closely with, and in maintaining the trees of that area. And those are good examples, as well as what I think, as well as what's happening on Connecticut Ave and Quebec Street, of where focused attention can really help support tree health in a kind of like a block size area, in these small areas, where you have people who have the desire and the ability to provide that. And I just wanted to thank Stella for reminding me about the other best management practices that she mentioned. And these are hugely important with regards to mulching practices. Are extreme. What we see is very detrimental to overall tree health. And now we're talking into like small to medium sized trees, as well as edging, mulching. And these are things which can be corrected by a resident or by a community member. And as Stella has done many times, And it takes just a short kind of once somebody knows kind of what to look for and how to correct it, it's not too complicated, and we're very thankful for the efforts that have been made on that. But that's something that I just wanted to kind of add on to show how these other ways which tree health can be supported outside of watering, but through that, as Stella mentioned, community engagement, and also again on a kind of limited basis. I think efforts to those points on something like Connecticut Avenue could actually have a really positive benefit to the trees there.
Okay, great.
Not to
Go ahead.
over-participate, sorry, but in Mount Pleasant, the Mount Pleasant Village Group has been very, very successful in getting ANC funding. It's basically ended up being a partnership between Mount Pleasant Village and the ANC. And they applied for a series of grants for the tree box plantings, and they were in the range of $2,000 and $3,000. And they've gotten those over several, I guess, over the last year. And now they've planted 25 tree boxes with native plants, and are planning to do more. So just in one season, they managed to do 25 boxes, and they also, as volunteers, have been watering. So, and I have copies of the grant application that the Mount Pleasant Village folks did. But they're a very particular group of people. They're, if you know any of them, they're former NGO leaders and Peace Corps volunteers, and they have time and they have good health, and they're very motivated. So there's been a really strong volunteer effort to do all that care. And I don't know to what extent it can be replicated in other neighborhoods. Potentially in Cleveland Park, I think we might have some of the similar demographic, but probably it would be very dependent on the particular neighborhood makeup, the social capital, if you will. But they succeeded with the ANC, and this seems to be working well.
Well, cool. Well, I think we'll have to carry this on maybe by email or informally because we're at our time. I do want to offer anyone for last comments here, or in particular next steps or actions you'd like to see going forward coming out of this. I see Cassandra up first. If there's anybody else who wants to make a sort of final comment or point to actions you'd like to see coming out of this, go ahead.
I was just curious if anybody knew about a group called DC Natives. They plant gardens, and it looks like for free. I reached out to them. I am unable to attend their Zoom meeting next week, but is that, anyone have any feedback about them?
They're a good volunteer group. They have a long waiting list of people who want to get the free plantings.
Figured. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just end saying thank you all for the time and questions, and it's just my hope to just strengthen my relationship with the local community groups and find ways to help them help me, I guess, when it comes down to it. But we're working towards the same goals. So thank you.
Really appreciate your responsiveness, Aaron. I know I've sent people to you with questions about their trees and so forth, and I appreciate your responsiveness. Anybody else want to say anything as final comments here?
Thank you,
Okay,
Aaron and Stella, for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to write up a few notes here and maybe proffer a few sort of action items or suggestions for things we can try to take forward going out of this. Thanks, everyone. Have a happy New Year, and have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thanks, Galen, and thanks to our speakers.
Thanks for organizing, Gawain. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
How would you